The holiday season is upon us. You may not recognize his name immediately, but every Pittsburgher is aware of his congregation. Thrust into the national spotlight due to unthinkable terror, he had no roadmap, just faith and support of a community. His guidance was masterful, but who is he? We're about to find out. This is Kevin Battle Goes One-on-One with Rabbi Jeffrey Myers of the Tree of Life. Thank you very much. And Rabbi, it's an absolute honor to have you here and to meet you. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Kevin, for the invitation. A pleasure to be here.
Before we get into some serious topics, I just want to introduce you to our audience. Faith, obviously front and center in your life. I read that your path was, well, it seemed unveiled at an early age. Very involved as a child in the temple. You were a cantor at 15. How important is that role in the Jewish faith?
Judaism is unique as a religion in that it is the only religion that has two clergy in it. There's the rabbi that I think most people are familiar with the title, which is a Hebrew word. Actually, it means my teacher. That describes the essence of what a rabbi is and does, which is to teach, to use the words of the Bible to teach us how to live our lives, to be moral and just human beings. That's the essence of the rabbi. The cantor, or the Hebrew term, which is chazan, actually predates the rabbi. The role of the cantor is to chant the prayers. In my case, I'm ordained as both. So I do both for Tree of Life. There is a lot in common between the two callings. Both rabbis and cantors serve the pastoral needs of the congregation. Cantors are more often than not the ones engaged in training bar bat mitzvah students, choirs. The rabbi is more the public face of the congregation to the rest of the community. But there's a lot of overlap, and hopefully in congregations that have rabbis and cantors, both of them should work well together for the benefit of the community, and hopefully that's the case.
You'll be forever part of the Pittsburgh community, but one thing that people don't know, you were raised in New Jersey, correct?
Yes, I was born in Newark, spent our early years in Newark. My family then moved as my sister was going to be born. They needed a bigger place. So eventually we moved south, and I spent most of my formative years in Roselle, New Jersey, which is adjacent to Elizabeth.
Just sort of the perimeter of New York City, just on the outlying areas of New York City. I was in Rutherford. I lived in Rutherford for a while, so I know that entire area all the way down to the Jersey Shore pretty well.
Yeah, I spent most of my life in the summers, particularly going to the Jersey Shore. That's what you did growing up in New Jersey is every day would be at the shore. And to me, life couldn't be better. As a kid, you're at the shore. What more do you need? You
grew up in a family that appreciated outdoor living and the Jersey Shore, and you realize that Pittsburgh doesn't have a shore, but we have the rivers.
Yes. Although, it's interesting. I've come to discover more and more as I get to know people. Lots of people over the summers, going back really decades, go to Atlantic City prior to the casinos being built. It's sort of coincidental because my last congregation was in Ventnor, which is a suburb of Atlantic City. So there's a connection between me having been in that area for a number of years and so many people from here who would summer in Atlantic City.
When I lived around the country and people would come to Pittsburgh and tell me how great of a time they had, or they said they were going to Pittsburgh, or what should they do, I got a little jealous. Do you feel a little jealousy sometimes when somebody says, hey, I'm going to the Jersey Shore for the weekend or for a vacation? Does some of that say, you know what, that's my Jersey Shore too?
I miss it, particularly in the summer. It's a place you want to be. But I have a 1-minute video I recorded this past summer when we were at the shore. I have it on my phone, so at times when I miss it or could just use a calming moment, I'll just play that 1-minute video. I just hear the sound of the ocean and just the image of it. So I have it with me on my phone.
I think that's great advice for anybody. I might do that next year when I go to the shore.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned your sister. How big was your family growing up? Was it a big festive family?
Immediate family. I have a younger sister, mom and dad. But in terms of family growing up, we always spent time with our extended family, both my mom's family and my father's family, on a regular basis. Most of my mother's family was in what people would call central or northern New Jersey. My father's family was primarily from Brooklyn, so we would drive into Brooklyn. When I say drive, part drive, part ferry, because the Verrazano Narrows wasn't built yet. So you would drive to Staten Island, and then you'd have to take the ferry from Staten Island into Brooklyn. As a kid, I thought that was exciting.
Absolutely.
To stand outdoors when the weather would permit. The pretzels were only a nickel, and just enjoy being on the ferry both ways.
I absolutely loved when I was there. Now, the Verrazano Bridge is there, so I didn't have to take the ferry from there. But from Manhattan to Staten Island, that was one of my favorite parts of New York City, was getting on the Staten Island ferry. I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
You're dating yourself a bit by saying the bridge wasn't there yet. You remember it before Giant Stadium was where it is, MetLife Stadium is now.
Yeah, I remember it was just pure swampland. I remember when they finally decided at some point that they were going to build it. Certainly for people who live in New Jersey, that's exciting because New Jersey has never had its formal pro teams on a higher level. You know, we had the Newark Bears, minor football, baseball as well. There have been minor league teams strewn around New Jersey. The Nets used to play in Long Island, but then for a while they were playing in New Jersey. But New Jersey lacks identity. The joke we always say about New Jersey is if you grew up in South Jersey, in those days there were 2 area codes. 609 was South Jersey. If you were 609, you were associated with Philadelphia. That means all your sports teams are Philadelphia teams. Your newscasts on television were all from the Philadelphia stations because New Jersey didn't have its own major networks. To this day, it still doesn't. If you grew up in central or northern New Jersey, your area code was 201. Your sports teams were all the New York area teams, and your broadcasts were the New York stations. So New Jersey lacked an identity. Half of it is a New York state. The other half is a New Jersey state. The people in the middle had to make up their minds which one you want to go to.
When you were growing up, there was that one favorite toy as a kid. You mentioned the beach as your favorite spot. What did a young kid named Jeffrey, way before Rabbi, what did you love? What was that one toy that takes you back?
I had a light green Tonka tow truck. We don't have it. I don't know whatever happened to it. That's in the days when toys were metal.
Yes.
That's probably one of the earliest toys I can remember was that light green tow truck.
I remember I had one of those yellow Tonka dump trucks that was steel. It was so strong we would sit on it and push each other around on it.
Yeah.
Well, I hope someday you can find that. It's probably worth a small fortune. Okay, now as an adult, a leader, you were forced onto the world stage. You're a man of moral clarity and unparalleled leadership. Why is that clarity so easy for you, yet so hard for so many others?
Wow, what an interesting question. I don't know if I really have an answer.
Is it maybe the foundation that your parents instilled in you, your grandparents, or is it just something that is natural to you?
I would think it's probably a combination of all of the above, something genetic, something in one's upbringing. We all know that words matter. We've heard it so much. If they matter, then you have to choose them carefully. The Talmud, which is the repository of the discussions held in the early rabbinic academies 2,000 years ago over what does the Torah mean, tells us that the most powerful weapon in the world are words. Words can wound and words can heal. So I think it's really important to select one's words carefully. Most people don't have the opportunity to just sit and think about what they're going to say unless they're crafting a speech. If it's spur of the moment, and much of what I've been called to do is spur of the moment type of question answer, I think that deep down one's faith is a guiding spirit for that. I believe that God does help guide me in the right ways, I'd like to think, in what I say and what I do. When I wake up every morning, part of my morning routine before our morning services, I'll recite the 121st Psalm. I lift my eyes to the heavens. Where does my help come? My help comes from God, maker of heaven and earth. And then I'll say to God, help guide me today. What do you need me to do? What do you need me to say? And if you're not too busy, can you help me put the words in the right order? Because I also recognize that it's an awful lot to do to be able to say on a regular basis. I don't claim any great superpower to be able to do that. It's inspiration from God that I have faith that the right things will be said at the right time.
I think you're right about choosing your words. I think as we get older, each person, myself included, realizes how much the words matter. You do have to be careful. When you're young, you're sort of flippant and you're just throwing them around and you don't mean anything by them sometimes. But as you get older, you realize, I do remember those and they can hurt. For your heroism, you recently received much recognition, obviously. One in particular from the Simon Wiesenthal Center, Medal of Valor. The inscription on that medal, he who saves a single life, it is as if he saved an entire world. Do you feel that in your efforts 3 years ago that you saved maybe everything in our region from collapsing?
Well, that's a heavy load to lift. I've never sought any sort of recognition, nor do I really want any. I'm an ordinary person who was thrust into an extraordinary situation and just sort of responded without any thought about it. I had taken a number of training classes when I'd come here, offered through the Jewish Federation. The director of security at the time, his name is Brad Orsini. I'd never had classes on security, safety, and all of those measures. I took them, I read the material, and I'd like to think I internalized it. Mm-hmm. So that day, my responses were part of me. I didn't have to stop and flip open a manual to see, okay, what do I do now? I just did. Part of it was just common sense, plus the training I had just told me what seemed like the right thing to do. I wish there was more I could have done. I regret that there was not more that I could do, and that 7 of my congregants, a total of 11 in our building because there were 2 other congregations also perished. I wish there was more that I could have done. Alas, there wasn't.
Yeah. The tree of life, I mean, you came face to face with pure evil. And there are some people who will listen to this interview looking for something to use against your faith in a sick, twisted way, trying to validate their hate. But it may change them for the good as well when they listen to your words. How do you, as a leader, stop the corrosion of a soul when you encounter it?
When you just said that, I thought of the words of Senator Alan Simpson at the funeral for former President George H.W. Bush, when he used the H word, which is how I refer to it, corrodes from the inside. A lot of people don't even recognize what's happening to them, or that they no longer resemble who they were, because this just takes such hold of them and turns them into someone else. I wish I could say that there's a one-size-fits-all easy answer. I don't believe there's one. I believe it's part of relationship building, of people being brave enough to walk in the shoes of someone else, as the proverb says, for a few days, and to recognize in the end that we are all alike. The things that distinguish us and make us different are so minimal when you think about our lives, the things that we want. We all want a roof over our heads, food on our table, clothes on our back, equal access to a good education, equal access to a good paying job with good benefits, good health insurance, a good retirement plan. We all want the same things.
A little bit of comfort and joy and life. You know,
Yeah.
it takes me back to our conversation about the New York City area. I was with my parents in Times Square once, and they hadn't been there in decades. And I was showing them the town where I lived and everything, and we get there, and it's just a festive atmosphere inside Times Square. And I said, there's people from all over the planet in Times Square at all times, and it's always busy no matter when you go there. And I said, isn't this neat? Everybody here is happy, and they're looking for the best for their kids. Like, they're smiling, taking their pictures. It was a tourist spot, you know, but it didn't matter where you were from. Everybody was trying to get their picture taken and smiling. It seemed like a good mix.
There is something magical about Times Square in that sense, but I think that every city has the potential to have magic about it if people are willing to work together to achieve that. It doesn't just show up. You can't order it online and have it delivered to your house. You have to be able to work on it to create it. And I think that that's possible anywhere you go. I've experienced a number of magical moments here in Pittsburgh because people wanted it to be magical. So it became magical. So it's really, I think, possible anywhere. Pittsburgh itself has a lot that it can offer as a magical place as well. People just have to be willing to say, let's make it happen.
Absolutely. In Pittsburgh, everybody who comes here says it is a really great place to be with great people. And we're speaking with one of them, Rabbi Jeffrey Myers of the Tree of Life congregation. You were talking about just people understanding each other. The lack of understanding leads to fear. We will get a clearer picture of your faith in a bit, but first, what one misconception would you like to clear up right now? Something so simple or innocent or out of ignorance that somebody just doesn't understand that you would like to stop or automatically relearn in them. Maybe it's a stereotype, for a lack of a better term.
I kind of like to harken back to the Bible again. I guess that's because I'm a person of faith. In the very beginning, humanity is created. There's just 2 people, 1 man, 1 woman. And the teaching that our Torah gives the rest of the world is there was just one original set of parents to say that no one is of greater parentage than anyone else. We all go back to the same original set of parents. So we're all one big family on this planet. Think about how you treat your family. And if you're all family, then family has a bond, has a responsibility to each other. And it doesn't matter where you live, what your parentage is, the color of your skin, your faith, your sexual orientation. None of that matters. Get rid of all of the labels. It would be great if we could just be a label-free society and just be human beings.
And 11 lives were taken, 11 trees of remembrance recently planted in Shenley Park. The attack of October 27th, 2018 is forever part of our history, unfortunately. The world witnessed it unfold in the streets of Pittsburgh and in your synagogue. It had never happened before like that. Who did you lean on? It hadn't happened in a synagogue like that. Was there somebody that immediately said, this happened in my church? Was there a pastor that reached out to you, or was it just the community? How did you get your leadership?
Initially, I didn't really know where to go. I think certainly part of that would be shock, disbelief. part one throughout all of it is I continue to lean on God. I do believe that God has been there the times that I call God to help guide me, to help give me answers, to just be a source of strength and comfort and hope and support at a time when sometimes you could feel really alone because I'm in this ultra marathon. So that's a daily presence in my life. The other was from an unexpected source. I was sitting on my sofa in our living room that Tuesday night, I think it was. The massacre had been that Saturday. You know when you sit and you have your cell phone in your hand and you scroll through email, and it's kind of like one of those old-fashioned one-armed bandits in the casino. It spins until the numbers stop. Well, so the email's just spinning, and I'm looking at the count, like thousands upon thousands of email. I'm thinking, oh my God, how am I going to ever answer all of these? And it just stopped. And it stopped right there in the middle of my screen. And there's an email from a pastor in Charleston, South Carolina. I'm stopping and thinking, Charleston. I know Charleston. Why Charleston? And then I remembered that massacre in a church there. Let me open that email, because I really wasn't opening a lot of email. So I clicked on that email. It was Pastor Eric Manning. He was not present at Mother Emanuel AME Church in Charleston when the massacre occurred. He wasn't there that day. Of the 9 who were murdered, the pastor, Clement de Pickney, of blessed memory, perished that day. He was later called by the bishop about a year later to come and serve his congregation. So he reached out to me and said he was coming to town. My immediate response is, you will not believe how many people keep coming to town as though I can host all of them. That's just impossible. I've got to take care of burying 7 people, the onslaught of media, which is indescribable. And as I can't host you. I don't even know when I can find time to meet with you. But he insisted he was coming in. Something drove me to go meet him for coffee that Friday morning. Quickly discovered that we were essentially brothers from another mother. I learned this wonderful phrase from him called the ministry of presence. What that means is that he's just there to just be there. He's not carrying an agenda. He doesn't have flowers or an extra cup of coffee. Just to be present for whatever I might need. So we sat and talked for 2 or 3 hours. It was incredible. At the end of it, he asked if he could go to the funeral that Friday at 1 o'clock. That was the last of the funerals for me for the week. It was the concluding one. It was for Rose Mallinger. May God rest her soul. She was 97. And I said, no, you're not just going to come. I want you to read the 23rd Psalm, and I want you to share whatever words of comfort you can bring. So we had the funeral at Rodef Shalom. Imagine the look and surprise of all the people there that went out walks, not just Rabbi Myers, but a black pastor with him. They have no idea. So after opening Psalms and so forth, a little bit of an opening, I said to people, and I'm sort of paraphrasing it, I believe in angels. Most of you may think now, this poor man, what he's been through, let's get the medical attendants, put him in that white coat and take him away. And I said, no, but really, I believe in angels. God sends angels as messengers to perform acts for God. God sent an angel to me, and I'll introduce you to my angel. His name is Pastor Eric Manning of Mother Emanuel AME Church. So I invited him up. He read the psalm and offered beautiful words to help comfort in a way that only he could understand. We've been close ever since and regularly speak, text, email, do programs together with each other. So I would have to say, if people would ask, like, who pastors the pastor kind of moment, and what people might think might be the oddest of statements, the rabbi's pastored by an AME pastor.
That's tremendous. That's amazing. Now, what about your flock, the survivors? It's your congregation in the end. There's the public side of it, which we see on the news, and all the politicians and everybody showing up to give their sympathies and their thoughts and prayers. What about your congregants? How are they doing?
So when all the lights go down and everyone goes home, how are we doing? There isn't a one-size-that-fits-all answer because people are all different and all respond in different ways. The best comparison I would give is if you could have, say, 100 slots on any given day, any moment, I could take and put congregants in each of those slots and fill all of them from 0 to 100, with 0 being the worst possible day to 100 being I feel great. And that could be all at the same time. And I say that because, from my perspective, we will always be healing, not healed. Why that? The reminders are always around us. Walk down Murray Avenue, you see stronger than H signs on people's lawns. That's beautiful that they have that. But it's a reminder. So many of the stores on Murray Avenue have signs of different types in their windows, the same thing. It's a reminder. If you drive by Tree of Life, the building is a reminder. Anytime I see any of my congregants are a reminder. One of our media people told us something that initially I thought couldn't be true, but as I've looked into it further, I've come to discover it is true. Tree of Life is mentioned every day somewhere in media in the United States. I can't say that every time there's a mass shooting I'm reminded, but frequently, yes. That's one of the reasons where I won't regularly watch TV news. No disrespect to KDKA or any of the other stations that do their best to present the news. Seeing images of rapid response teams and other personnel responding to a mass shooting takes me back to October 27th, 2018. I just can't keep doing that to myself. So I won't necessarily watch the news. I'll read about things, but I won't necessarily watch it because I'm living in Groundhog Day, the movie, every single day. So I've been living in Groundhog Day, the movie, for 3 years. And I haven't come up with a different ending yet.
You know, it's interesting. Somebody once told me that a church or a temple is like a hospital. Everybody is there to get better faithfully, get more faithful, but they're on a different point in that journey as well. When I think of it that way, I think, yeah, you know, there's people here that are further ahead, closer to heaven than me, and maybe a little bit behind me in line at the pearly gates. That's one way of looking at it, I guess.
It is, but one of the other big differences is not merely that Jews are massacred for just merely being Jewish, but faith was stolen. It takes time to develop faith. How do you replace stolen faith from people? To me, that's really one of my big challenges. People who don't want to come to synagogue anymore because of that day. People who are still afraid to come to synagogue because of that day. And so I say to the public, really, there are Jews that are afraid to go to synagogue. Shame on America. That's a failing of America, that any people of any faith should feel afraid to go worship their God in their sacred space. It's a failing of America. And it's not up to the victims to fix that. It's up to America to fix that.
You mentioned fixing that, the security aspect of it. How would you do that? I mean, do you have security at the facilities now, at the churches and temples?
It's not about security.
It's about changing the culture. Is our culture becoming too coarse and too crass and too secular?
We lack civil discourse. We have far too much uncivil discourse. You know, and if our holy documents have the right to practice your faith, well, part of the right to practice your faith is that you should be able to practice it the way you want, but feeling secure in your faith and confident that I can practice my faith and that all other Americans will respect that right to do that and not interfere when I go into my house of worship. But it's not merely a Jewish problem. It's a problem of all faiths. We see countless stories of attacks on other faiths. There's a decay going on in America that even sacred spaces are no longer sacred. That's something that all of America has to stop for a moment and think about. Why is that happening in America, that people shouldn't feel safe in their sacred spaces to worship their God in the way that they would like to, without worry, without fear, without having to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to harden your institution, hire security personnel, do all of those sorts of things? Not every house of worship has access to those funds. Is that what worship's become in America? It used to be where all houses of worship, we have our doors open. We want to welcome anyone who wants to come for whatever their reason. If they're troubled, that they can turn to God. If they have something joyous to celebrate, they can turn to God. If they want to pray for healing of a family member, they can come. And that we're all open. We can't be open anymore. So how do we balance being open and welcoming with the security and the responsibility of making sure that it's a safe, secure environment? How do you do both at the same time? What's the balance that people shouldn't feel like they're literally walking into Fort Knox or like they're going through TSA to get on an airplane to just go into a synagogue or a church or a mosque?
I was taking a gift to a church at one point, and I won't name the location. It was out of state. But I actually had to get buzzed in because they were fearful of some issues that were happening in the community. That was an eye-opening experience. And also, I don't understand why people, if they don't agree with your faith, my faith, I'm Catholic, why they have to tear mine down or yours down to try to make themselves feel better. I never understood that thought process.
I'm not a mental health professional, so I don't presume to be one, but it seems to me there are a lot of unhappy people in this country. And if you're unable to focus on the source of your unhappiness, and that perhaps there are some internal reasons for that, and if you're unable to look in the mirror and see that perhaps I have more to do with my unhappiness, you foist that unhappiness upon others. And in most cases, it's minorities, which is one of the many reasons why minorities continue to be targets in the United States, because there are fewer. That's the number in that case. People are unable to stop, pause, and think, gee, might there be some reason other than a minority causing the problems that I have? What have I done to cause the problems that I have?
Yeah, I guess we change that hatred one interaction at a time. On a small scale, each individual person, we have to go out and welcome our neighbors and relieve some of that stress. You mentioned the congregation as a reminder to you at times. Will it be remodeled or raised, rebuilt, resituated? Do you mind me asking that?
Not at all. Great question, and I'm happy to share what I can at this time. I've said from the beginning, we will return. We will not let evil chase us from our house of worship, ever. Because when you do that, evil wins. And we're not letting evil win on my watch. I'm excited, honored that, in my estimation, the premier architect of his generation, Daniel Libeskind, is our architect, working on redesigning. Don't know what that exactly is going to mean yet. We're looking forward to getting the design concepts and then moving forward with the design process. And hopefully soon, but I don't have a specific timetable yet to share with your listeners, that we'll be excited to be able to share what the Tree of Life will look like. We will be there at Shady and Wilkins, but what that will look like yet, I don't know. To me, it's more than just a building, because a building is brick, mortar, stone, steel, glass, etc. And while people can look at any of the beautiful creations of Daniel Libeskind and go, wow, and I would hope that people would come to Tree of Life at that point and go, wow, look at the beauty of it. It's what emanates out of Tree of Life that's going to be game-changing. We're not going to be merely a synagogue. We're going to be far more. This is a wholesale transformation that you don't see in the United States. The building will contain a synagogue. Tree of Life will still be there. We've been present since 1874 in Pittsburgh, and we're not going anywhere. But far more, a place of education, a place to build bridges between peoples of other faiths, a place to fight the H word, as I say, a place to share our commonalities, a place to come together, a place to offer hope and inspiration, not merely for our congregants, but frankly for the entire world. Just as the entire world reached out to us, we're reaching back out to say, here are things that we're going to do in our attempts to make the world a better place. We extend our hand out in partnership to any and all who want to join us in that journey to do what we can to make the world a better place, so that out of the horror of October 27th, we're going to build something that offers inspiration and hope to the rest of the world. And we're just humbled that Daniel Libeskind is the one who wants to create the edifice part of it. But it's more than just the edifice. It's the light that's going to flow out of Tree of Life that we plan to make inspirational for all who enter our doors, or all who can be in contact with us in some way.
You'll inspire the whole region and the whole world by doing so.
Yes.
This is the tough question for me to ask you. It's a core of my faith, and I have had to grapple with it, and we all try to understand it. Do you forgive the person who is so consumed with hate? And some say, maybe in the future I will, but right now I'm still hurting.
I'm glad you asked that. Judaism and Christianity have very different views when it comes to forgiveness. I'll never forget hearing in person one of the survivors from Mother Emanuel. Her name is Polly. She came into town and gave a presentation. And during that time, she said that she forgave the shooter at Mother Emanuel. She didn't want to carry that burden that weighed her down. And she forgave. And I thought, wow, what a powerful statement. What an incredible thing to be able to do. Judaism has a different perspective on forgiveness. Forgiveness is not ours to just automatically dispense at a moment when you believe you're ready to do so. For forgiveness to occur, a person who has committed a wrong has to seek it, has to ask for it, has to show remorse for it. So if someone has harmed you in any way, shape, or form, they have to approach you and say, I'm sorry, I beg your forgiveness. In the case of the shooting in Tree of Life, there are 11 dead people that cannot be asked, cannot offer forgiveness. But so far as I'm concerned, the perpetrator has to show remorse and seek it. So it's not mine that I'm ready to give. It has to be sought, which then shows intentions to transform your life, to make your life something better, to become a better person. And part of that is to repair. So that's not in my hands from a Jewish perspective. That doesn't mean that I carry the burden with me of anger or waiting for this moment to happen. I don't. And people may be surprised to hear that. I'm not angry, and I don't carry anger with me, because anger itself is a destructive force that will just weigh you down and can harm you, both physically and emotionally. I've got too much to do to just focus on the anger of that time. So I don't really carry any anger about that day and what happened. But forgiveness is to be sought from a Jewish perspective. I know there are some who may offer forgiveness as Jews. I respect their right that they want to proceed down that path. And if that helps them in their healing, that's wonderful. I'm not sitting waiting, but to me, that's the traditional approach from Judaism. And I'm comfortable with it, and I'm okay with it.
I don't think anyone on the planet could have put it better. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to lighten things up a little bit. I lived in Baltimore, just off Green Spring Road, near Mount Washington and Pikesville, Reisterstown Road, a very large Jewish population. My good friend growing up was Jewish, but I had not experienced such a large and dynamic community like the one in Baltimore. It was amazing to me. It was very traditional, yet very fun and festive. And I learned an awful lot. So it was a great experience for me. But I learned a lot about Jewish holidays and traditions. We're going to learn here. I want you to explain some. Very quickly, we'll just go through some things. It's a big dinner on Friday nights. What is Shabbat? And it's very special to be invited to it, I learned.
Yeah. Shabbat means to rest. That's the essence of the word. And it's our recalling on a weekly basis God's acts of creation of 6 days. And on the seventh day, God rested. So we are imitating that act of God by ceasing work and focusing on what rest can mean. It affords one an opportunity to reconnect with family and friends.
Just put down the phone and enjoy company.
Let the phone rest for 25 hours. If they really need you, they will find you. Reminds me of a quick joke. A plane is going down, and a husband and wife are on the plane, and the wife turns to the husband and says, did you pay your pledge to whatever the organization was? The husband says, we're about to crash. You're worried about paying the pledge? Did you pay the pledge? Look at this emergency. We have to tuck our heads down in all of this. We're paying the pledge. What's about this pledge? Did you pay the pledge? He says, no, I didn't pay the pledge. Good. And the husband says to the wife, what do you mean good? He says, if we crash on an island, they'll find us. So don't worry if you don't pay your pledges. They will find you.
They find you. Okay.
But for me, for the Sabbath, particularly when my children were younger, we're empty nesters now, to be at home with the kids, to have a family meal, uninterrupted by cell phones or landlines, to just sit and talk about the week, the things that matter, enjoy company with each other, is beautiful. And for me, I think it's a really important gift that Judaism gave the world, because it's the first time in the history of humanity that there was a day off. No civilizations had a day off prior to the Jewish people gifting the rest of the world the Sabbath, a time to rest, to recharge, to renew. And I think too many people in today's world don't take advantage of the Sabbath, be it whatever day they observe the Sabbath on.
It's a priceless gift.
It is. And I think more people need to take the time to do that, because we are overworked. I saw a report recently that the average American who worked somewhere between 10 and 20 hours more per week than the typical 40-hour week. We're heading in the wrong direction. We've all become a nation of workaholics. Even people who go on vacation make sure they take their laptops and their cell phones and their devices with us just in case. And that's the wrong mentality. And it's got to come from the top down that when you're away, it's critically important to recharge the batteries. You can't recharge the batteries if you've got to check your email every minute for something that, quite frankly, can really, really wait. Unless it's something so earth-shattering. But even in that case, no matter what it is, again, they will find you.
They'll find you. You'll be on the island. They'll find you on the island. And that's great advice. This is the holiday season. People are going to be with their families. So take that advice to heart. There was another holiday. It seemed similar to Halloween, but in the spring. People dressed up and had parades. It was called Purim. What exactly was that?
The origins of Purim we find in the biblical book of Esther, and it occurred roughly 2,200 years ago. It occurs in Persia. We know Persia today as Iran. There's a rather significant Jewish community that was in Persia for a very, very long time. At some point within the history there arose the leading advisor to the king, who had a falling out with one Jewish citizen, because according to the book of Esther, Mordecai, who was the Jew, did not bow down and show obeisance to Haman, who was the king's leading advisor. Haman took it personally and decided that all Jews must be destroyed because of this one. He convinced the king to issue an edict to destroy all the Jews, as was the wont of kings throughout the generations. Kings had harems. Mordecai's niece, Esther, had somehow won a beauty contest and entered the king's harem. Mordecai said to Esther, don't tell them that you're Jewish, because that might not work out well for you. So she kept it a secret. But then when this edict was issued, Mordecai then said to Esther, you won that contest for a reason, and this is now the reason. You have to go to the king and tell him. So to make this long story short, Esther bravely went to the king, told the king of Haman's evil plot. The king tore up the edict, and the Jews of Persia were saved. That's the essence of the book of Esther. So we read that biblical book every year to commemorate the fact that through Esther's bravery, the Jewish community of Persia was saved. Look, frankly, if you have a holiday to celebrate the fact that a community wasn't destroyed, that's something to celebrate. People do wear costumes as part of the celebration to dress up. There's also a custom of writing a parody of the book of Esther. But the essence of Purim is that a minority community was saved from destruction by the bravery of one young woman.
There was another unique celebration. People built tents in their front yards in Baltimore to dine in. There were large structures, no roofs to them. It happened every fall. It's called Sukkot?
Sukkot. Many of your listeners may know it as the Feast of the Tabernacles. It commemorates two elements. One of them was the annual fall harvest, which occurred in ancient Israel. Many did not live immediately near their fields. So when the harvest season began, to go back and forth every day would take up a lot of your time that could be spent harvesting. So they would build these temporary huts in the fields, and it's called a sukkah. When we say no roof, they would put various vegetation, branches, things like that on top of the roof, but the tradition is that you're supposed to be able to see the stars of the sky through the roof. So it's very temporary, and it was all about the harvest. Sukkot also has a dual purpose. The other part is to remind us of the Israelites' wanderings in the wilderness for 40 years. They erected something similar to that could be easily assembled and easily disassembled and brought with you wherever you go.
Oh, very interesting. I'm glad I asked that because I never knew what that was. But I have a lot of other questions, but I don't want to take up your whole day. This is the holiday season, and let's remind everybody that we are recording this a few days before Hanukkah. Now, Hanukkah, many non-Jews know it from an Adam Sandler song, the Festival of Lights. Usually falls right around Christmas. It is this week. Can you explain the traditions and the significance of Hanukkah?
Hanukkah suffers from the fact that it frequently occurs around the same time as Christmas and is being given some equality, which is unfair to both holidays. Christmas is a major Christian holiday. It celebrates the birth of Jesus, their Savior. Hanukkah is a minor festival that's been artificially elevated because of the timing of it. Hanukkah also, roughly 2,200 years ago, during that time in the ancient land of Israel, the Syrian Greeks controlled that part of the land. Their attempts were to assimilate the entire population into the Syrian Greek culture. A small band under the leadership of Judah Maccabee, his father was the high priest, they gathered together, a small band, and literally fought guerrilla warfare over a period of time, and in the end defeated the vast Syrian Greek army. So the story of Hanukkah is one that a minority fought to be able to continue to express their faith in the way that they wanted to, because their entire existence was indeed threatened with just being totally wiped out by the Syrian Greeks. When they did eventually defeat them, the ancient Holy Temple at that time had been defiled. They cleaned it up, had it rededicated to God. The Hebrew word for rededication is Chanukah. So it gets its name from that act of rededicating the Holy Temple. To celebrate that, we light the menorah for 8 days. We add a candle each of the nights, so that by the 8th night we'll have 8 plus 1 called the shamash, which is the helper candle, to light the other candles. So, in the scheme of history, it's an important moment because there was a real threat to the survival of the Jewish community in the ancient land of Israel. But when you compare that within the panoply of Jewish history to Christmas, Christmas is far more important. It's just a function of timing. But the real question, perhaps I can help just a pinch if it's okay, the timing of the holidays. People always wonder, why are holidays always on different dates? They're never like the same date in the year. They're always, as we say, early or late, right? This year, Hanukkah comes the Sunday night after Thanksgiving.
Yeah, it's very early this year.
Right, it's early, right. How come our holidays are never on time? Well, the Jewish calendar is based upon the lunar cycle, the moon. So it's the 25th day of the month of Kislev. So for us, it's the same date every year, but it's not the same solar date. Why is that? A lunar year is 354 days. A solar year, 365. There's an 11-day difference. So in theory, every year, if we didn't touch our lunar calendar, our holidays would be 11 days earlier every year. So the next year would be 22 days. The next year, 33. 44, you can see how the number gets earlier and earlier. So why is that a problem in the Jewish faith? The holiday of Passover, in the Bible, it must occur on the full moon after the vernal equinox. So you can see how closely aligned Passover and Easter are. So to be able to make that happen, we had to change something about the calendar. What we do is we had a month, 30 days. So within the course of a 19-year period, 7 times within that 19-year period, we had 30 days to try to realign the calendars. If you look at the calendar after 19 years, the Jewish calendar would be out of sync with the solar calendar by 210 days. Wow. So for those of you that I hopefully am not overwhelming with math, if a month is 30 days, and you add a new month 7 times. 7 times 30 is 210. It realigns. So every 19 years, the calendars realign. So we had a month. Every now and then, our holidays seemingly are either early or late, but never on time.
But they're right on time to you.
They're right on time for me.
They're a little off.
Right. For the solar year, they're not aligned. But I thought also just an interesting piece for your listeners. The Muslims also use a lunar calendar. But they chose to not realign the calendar. So that means every year Ramadan will be 11 days earlier than the year before. So Ramadan can either be in the winter or it could be in the summer. It depends upon the cycle of the year. But every year Ramadan is 11 days earlier than it was the year before.
I appreciate you clarifying the calendar and explaining Hanukkah. And happy Hanukkah to you, your congregation, and the entire community. Speaking of communities, you grew up, this is our last segment, you grew up in the New York, New Jersey area. I believe you lived in Illinois. So what is your favorite? Is it New York style or Chicago deep dish pizzas? Let's settle that right here.
Sorry, New York pizza wins.
Okay. Hot dogs. Is it Nathan's on Coney Island or is it Chicago dogs with all the vegetables on it?
Actually, the interesting thing is, the Nathan's hot dogs aren't kosher, and most Chicago dogs aren't kosher, so you have to go with any...
Sabrettes.
Sabret isn't kosher either.
Oh.
You have to go with ones that are kosher. There aren't a lot of kosher companies that make hot dogs. There are some. I don't eat a lot of hot dogs during the year, a few maybe during the summer, because that's the perfect time of year to grill a couple of hot dogs. But for me, a hot dog, just good hearty mustard. That's it. That's all I need.
As a young man growing up in the shadows of New York, there's that hustle and bustle. I loved it. I lived there. Pittsburgh's different. It's a much slower pace than what you were probably used to. What was your first impression of Pittsburgh?
When I first came out here to essentially audition for the position, I'd never been to Pittsburgh. I didn't really know where Pittsburgh was, other than I knew it was somewhere the western part of Pennsylvania. That's all I knew. Growing up in the East, in those days, we referred to this region of the United States as Pennsyltucky. Which would incorporate all of western Pennsylvania, eastern Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia. All of it is just some amorphous zone, kind of like the cover of the New Yorker magazine that shows New York and then L.A., and then the rest of the country doesn't exist.
We would be the state of Appalachia if we were...
Right, something like that. So I didn't even know where it was when two of the people from the Rabbi Search Committee brought me out then. We paused at Mount Washington, which is a magnificent view. When I've had friends come in, I'll take them to Mount Washington because it's magnificent. Nothing beats the view from up there.
No, the city does surprise you, and it pulls you in, doesn't it?
It does. What really surprised me about Pittsburgh, I think, is the wide variety of cultural opportunities, between museums, the symphony, opera, dance, the August Wilson Center. Just so much variety here, which really just surprised me because, again, I tried to do a little research about Pittsburgh, but it's seeing it that makes you appreciate what an immense catch basin it is. I'm still puzzled by why so many people would want to build a house on a hill. I don't
That's
get
all we
that.
have.
Right, all you have are hills.
That's all we
So I'm
have.
just trying to think, well, why would people want to gather at hills? I get that to live where rivers are for transportation, that makes perfect sense, and the plentifulness of coal. I get all of that, but where I grew up and where I've lived, it's always been flat. So to me, that's been one of the biggest differences is getting used to Pittsburgh hills, which you can't do having lived in flat land.
Getting around is difficult, too, because it is basically a triangle with hills and cliffs. It's an odd way to get around. It's very hard. Your geography is a little different compared to the oceanic floodplain that you grew up on in New Jersey.
When you're at the beach, you'll always know which way is east. That's never a problem. Sometimes I get befuddled, thank goodness for a GPS system, because I don't always know which way is north, south, east, or west when I'm in the greater area. But to me, the biggest difference is not institutions, it's people. And I've seen that exhibited in the prime example was October 27th and the days following, where people from all walks of life, all faiths, all colors, just came and showed up, not just that day, but in days following, offer whatever help they could. And to me, that's Pittsburgh, which is too much of a secret that the rest of the country doesn't know. Like every city, all cities have problems. There is no such thing as a perfect idyllic city. But there's a goodness that's shown through, as though the spirit of Mr. Rogers pervades every person, that you breathe his spirit when you live here. My house is 6 blocks away, roughly, from where he lived. So I do live in Mr. Rogers' neighborhood. And to me, that's really what Pittsburgh is about, the good people, how the Islamic Center immediately put together a GoFundMe page and said, we're going to take care of all of the funerals. Don't you worry about it. And if you need people to be outside so that you can feel safe to pray, or to take you shopping or whatever. And to be able to say to the rest of the world, Jews and Muslims can get along and work together, what a powerful statement to the rest of the world of what is possible. The outreach from the Diocese of Pittsburgh, the outreach from the Sikh community, from Calvary Episcopal, other Protestant denominations, the black churches in the Hill District, wherever you go. I know I'm leaving people out. That's a problem when you mention.
But the city reached out.
The city continues to reach out to this day. And that, to me, says more about Pittsburgh and how it's different and, in some regard, better than New York because of the goodness of people. That's not something that you can bottle, but I do believe you can teach it. And I do believe that the good people of Pittsburgh have a lot they can teach the rest of the country, if not the rest of the world, about caring for each other and all that goes with that. And to me, and I no doubt too, from my congregation, from the other two congregations, from the Jewish community of Pittsburgh, there's a gratitude that we will forever carry. That thank you just seems insufficient. But that's all the English language affords me to be able to express that type of gratitude. And the fact that so many Pittsburghers who didn't belong to Tree of Life felt this is a personal attack upon Pittsburgh. That was really just an incredible thing to behold to this day. That it wasn't just an attack upon them. But I don't want this to define what Pittsburgh is, because this is not what Pittsburgh is. The act of one person does not define us. And I won't let that act define us, because the goodness that's there far outweighs one heinous act.
The good neighborliness could be our best export.
I think it is. I think it's our best product. I think it surpasses steel, sports, and anything else. It goes far deeper into our souls. To me, there's just something beautiful about that.
Rabbi Jeffrey Myers of the Tree of Life congregation, thank you so much for going one-on-one with me today. I truly appreciate your time. Happy Hanukkah.
Thank you, Kevin. Early Merry Christmas to all of your listeners, those who celebrate Kwanzaa, any other faiths. May your holiday seasons be one of joy and light.
Thank you.